James. James, can you hear me? Hello? I just see James Snyder. I can hear you and I can see you. I see you muted yourself, but you didn't talk before. Can you hear me? Oh.
There we go.
Hey, James.
I've been having technical difficulties, so
Well,
I'm on plan B.
Yes, it seems like it's 60 New Hampshire as well.
It's what, New Hampshire?
60 degrees. Your background shows
Oh,
it's nice and sunny.
This would not be reflective of the current state up here. It's
a lot of snow.
Well, actually, today was a warm day. We made it up to 30, and we've still got about 3 feet of snow on the ground, and we're supposed to get snow before the end of the meeting tonight, so it may be flaking by the time I'm done.
So that's great. I don't mind this stuff. Here we had 60.
Well, that's not too bad. Well,
60.
I'm coming home on Friday, so I guess I'll get to experience that soon enough.
Yeah, it's supposed to be nice. Barely any snow left. As a matter of fact, probably nothing at this point. So what time is Jonah logging in?
So she should be coming on any moment now. She said she was going to try and make it between 30 and 20 minutes before the hour.
Okay.
So we can practice a little bit. I also have her slides here. So let me actually pull up PowerPoint and see if it's working.
So James, I have 8 points to go through. So I'll just let you know, it's going to be probably 10 or so minutes, maybe between 10, 15 maximum, because I got to go through this whole spiel. I got to talk about about the recording. I got to recognize all the SMPTE managers. About the elections, I got to talk about upcoming events, which is what we are working on, the little series of conferences. I just want to put it out there for them and encourage them to email us if they think there is something that they would specifically be interested in, or put it in chat.
Sure.
Then I'll be talking, I'll just mention SMPTE Cloud Club, and I will ask John to say a few words about it, to promote it for March 11th. Then always job announcement spiel briefly, and I have few links to post in the chat. I will also ask people to do that, and then I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
So you can introduce her, say a few words, and things like that.
Okay. Sounds good.
So it shouldn't be too long, but we got to dance that dance.
Well, it's the normal meeting open, basically.
Yes, something like that. And this is my favorite part of any day.
Well, we got to do the business we got to do.
That's right.
All right.
You trimmed your beard at all or not?
Well, I mean, there are like things that go a little, buck wild over on the side. So I take the ones that get like stuck over here, but this one I've been pretty much letting go, just kind of seeing where it goes, see how tired I get of it getting into my zipper before I finally go, screw it.
Yeah, and that, so after you cut it, before you zip it, you'll go like this. This will be
Oh,
just,
absolutely. I've been doing
oh,
that for a while.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Even
yeah.
it will be long gone, you'll
Well, and
do
it's
that.
also it also says how much is growing underneath here, because I actually shave a little bit every once in a while underneath here,
Mhm.
and when these start to grab, that's when I know it's time to trim again.
Listen, do you have direct, phone number to her, to Jonas, just in case if she's not coming up, fast enough, if you need to call her
Well,
directly?
I gave her my number to text in case she was having problems, but let me
Okay.
look really
All right.
quick.
So you do have a way to get in touch with her directly. So
Yeah,
that's good.
and in fact, I just traded emails with her about 10 minutes ago.
Okay. So that's fine.
Um,
That's
so
fine. So it
hopefully.
looks like we are recording already.
Oh, lovely. Well, clearly we'll have to edit this part out.
Yes, we will. We will, because we are talking crap behind people's back.
I know. Luckily, we're not saying anything like the, what was it, the school board somewhere where everybody was saying, those darn parents, they just want their babysitters back.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Not exactly a good way to make friends in the community.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an issue in our, county, that a lot of people, and they're to blame, because they said that because it will have to be split between virtual and in class, they will send substitute teachers to schools, and the full timers will teach from home. So
Right.
Oh, here she is. You muted, Jonah. Can you hear us?
Can you hear us? Can you
Hey,
hear me now?
you can hear me now.
There we go.
How are you?
I'm good. Long time no see.
That's right. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So it seems you have not been not busy. You've been really busy. Everybody's sitting.
Not busy. Boy, that's a double negative.
That's right.
Is that that's your slides that you're?
I am. Do you want to take control and make sure that you can do it from yours?
Yeah, that would
Okay.
be a good quick test. I have the two presentations and I had to play around with it a little bit. So let me share my screen, share screen.
And you got my note from a few minutes ago about the transition between the two?
I didn't read it yet, so I'm going to do that now.
So I basically said, if you want to pause for questions, that's fine. If you don't, go straight into it. It's up to you, your discretion.
I'm going to pause in between because they're different enough.
Okay, that's fine.
So what are you seeing right now? Are you seeing the presenter's
Metadata
view?
for all.
Okay, and I think I usually have the captions on.
You do have the captions on. That's odd. That looks odd.
If it looks odd, I can turn it off.
Well, I don't know. How do you feel, Mache? I always like to be inclusive if we have the technology of folks who are hearing impaired or.
I think this is great. And if this for some reason is causing hardship to viewers, they should let you know in the chat or otherwise to say, please turn it off. It's really confusing me. I can't do both things, read and look at the picture.
Yeah, that's fine. If you're comfortable with that, Yonah.
I've started doing it in some meetings because it ends up being helpful if you're watching the recording later.
Yeah. Well, especially if people are talking over each other or, if you missed something because of the connection. And since this is a couple of seconds behind, you can catch up with whatever you may have missed.
Yeah.
Right. Or if your dog or your child is barking.
Exactly. Yes. Especially if your child is barking.
That's right. Is somebody monitor the chat?
So I can monitor, but I think that there will be more for James to do, since you are the moderator, or you produced the show, and probably will have that conversation with Jonah.
I'm fine with that, yeah.
Okay, so let's do this. And Jonah, just to let you know, I have to start this meeting with Simpty Business. So we'll be, few minutes of Simpty Business, short conversation, and then I will turn it over to James to introduce you and get the proper meeting started, okay?
Sure. No, that works perfectly. And I will take, give everybody, a couple minutes to stretch in between each presentation.
Sounds good.
Great. And can you send me your bio again? For some reason, I don't have it handy, and I was going to read it as part of your introduction. Can you email that to me again?
It's on the, you can just read it off of the.
Is it on your slides?
No, but it's on the website.
The Mesa website?
No.
Or I'm sorry, our website. Duh.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yep. Finishing my dinner.
No worries.
I haven't had that luxury yet. We developed a water leak up here today, so we're dealing with not only a foot thick covering of ice over the roof, but also water ingress from it.
That's not fun.
No, it is not.
So
this is 100-year-old house, and so we get all the pleasures along with that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I see recording. Do you also see recording? James, I want to make sure. Is it running?
Let me switch back. Yes, I've got recording in the upper left-hand corner.
Okay, all right. So I think it just starts recording it automatically once the meeting is started.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
And if you could just make sure, if I suddenly disappear, because I have noticed during a couple of my virtual meetings up here that I lose my connection for 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And if something important happens, if you can just take control and do whatever is necessary.
Do you need us? I have your phone number ends with 3543. Is that the good number? Just
actually use a different one. Use my Google Voice number, which is 202 670 7541. Because cell coverage is really squirrely up here, but I can still get calls on, well, if the internet's squirrely, it'll still be a problem.
Yeah, I see it. I have that one too also.
Okay.
All right, so just in case something happens. Okay.
Right. And if something really, really happens where my connection goes down for good, what number can I reach you to on where I can send you a text message saying I'm having a problem?
Sure. So for me, it's 240.
Actually, hold on. Let me get to the point where I can write this down. 240
599
599
64 83.
And do you have one that I can text you on, Yonah?
It's in my signature. Do you have access to email?
It'll take a little bit longer to get there.
Okay. 718 360 7437.
7437. Let the connection ring. We'll answer when it's your turn. Got it. Thank you.
I figured this was a good crowd for my Data Diva t-shirt.
Nice. So, very nice.
Yeah, my partner, he's like, well, aren't you going to get dressed up? And I'm like, nah, it's Simpty.
Yeah. We're informal enough.
I think this t-shirt is just fine. Tomorrow I'm doing an LMT presentation for Mesa. So that one I'll be a little bit more, that's Mesa Europe. So
Got to be a little more formal.
I'll be a little more formal, but for this, I thought it was just, it was.
What time are you doing that for them?
I
good.
will
During
tell
the
you in
day?
a moment. And then I'm also presenting at EU's Endorse conference on March 16th.
What's that? What's EU Endorse?
Oh, Google that one, James. They're doing a data and semantic conference. It's free.
Yeah.
And it's their first one ever. And it's run out of the EU's publications office with Dennis Deschardon.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I just haven't had a chance to post that stuff yet on LinkedIn, but I will. What am I looking up? I forgot.
I was just curious what time you're doing it for
what
Europeans.
time?
Yeah.
Yeah, for tomorrow. Tomorrow,
5-6 hour
presenting about 9:45 tomorrow morning. And Bruce Devlin is also going to be on the call. We have 15 minutes, I think. So I get like 11 or 12 and Bruce gets 2 minutes. It's a subset of today's LMT presentation. So this is the content workflow forum for MESA. And then it'll be a similar presentation then on March 16th for MESA Smart Content Summit. So do that. I can't remember which one is first, which is endorsed. They're both conferences around the same day because it's all or nothing.
It's amazing how when we're all virtual now, everybody has a conference online.
Right.
I'm lucky if I get to go to a 5th.
There's and what was the other thing that's coming up? There's some other conferences. I can't remember. It's just so much. So much. Oh, and now I'm a SMPTE standards member. That's it. I'm an official SMPTE standards member.
Oh, so you get to come to the quarterlies next month.
Yep.
So which are you a chair or are you just a participant?
Right now, I'm just a participant, and letting Bruce lead the SMPTE. He guides me. Sure.
Are you on a particular committee? What committee is handling LMT? What is that going through? I've forgotten.
MM 30 MR, whatever.
Right.
I can't talk in acronyms the way you do, James. Not yet.
Well, this has taken a lot of practice. And even then, when I go through, I review papers for the SMPTE journal, and even then I'm, sending messages to the editors in chiefs going, can we please add a section to the published papers where, you have the abstract, you have the title, you have your abstract, you have your keywords if they include them. Can we now include an acronym guide for this paper? Because I was reading one yesterday on FEMBMS, and my poor brain, even though I'd read it like 3 times, my poor brain was like, I can't remember, because I'm thinking, chemistry, ferric something. And it's like, no, it has nothing to do with iron. Well, I mean, I suppose it has something to do with iron, but
yeah,
big iron, not real iron.
I think, James, you have a question in the chat.
Oh, do I?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Hey, Evan, how are you? Hey, James. Amish, no, strictly speaking, Snyder would be Mennonite. But for those of you who may not be Pennsylvania Dutch, you may not know the difference. So what's the difference between Amish and Mennonite?
The length of the beard?
Actually, that's actually a good point, because I think neither the Amish nor the Mennonite would grow it this long.
Yeah.
But the difference.
So you're a rebel. I
am a rebel in the Christian Reformation world, I suppose. So the basic difference between Amish and Mennonite is Mennonite have a certain theology that they believe in, and you are one of those parts of that theology is you are meant to be plain, but you can do things like wear colors. You can use technology like cars and telephones, but with the Amish, traditional Amish, they have to be really plain, which means they can only wear black and white. and they are not allowed to use technology, not even phones, not cars. They're the folks who, drive around in buggies all the time. The really serious Amish, have fairly well rejected the technology era. It makes going to Lancaster, Pennsylvania very interesting.
Mr. Snyder.
How are you?
I obviously haven't seen you for a while.
Many people have not seen me for a while. I only have one computer that has a camera, and it's a desktop, and I rarely have it hooked up. And so I made a point of, I'm also in New Hampshire, and this is the computer I use for some serious work-related stuff. And so I made sure I set it up this time. And by the way, it is not sunny and 60 degrees in New Hampshire.
Or daylight there.
Or daylight. In fact, it is very, very dark outside, and probably snowing again. We've got 3 feet of snow on the ground.
Yeah, so so you and I have known each other for easily more than 30 years.
Probably.
And actually it's closer to 40 almost. 35 probably. And then but I haven't seen that look before.
Never. In fact, I didn't really start doing any kind of facial hair until, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, when I just decided I wanted to try something different. And of course, since we were all in quarantine this year, isolation, whatever you want to call it, I said, well, no one sees me, and I've never done it before. Why don't we go for it?
Yeah, I'd like to see you walk into your guys at the front desk there, at the circle desk in the bunker.
Well, they're kind of used to it, because we've been going back a couple of days a week since August. So they've seen it go from about here to down to here. But yeah, the first couple of times when we were out for, I think, 7 months straight, before I came back at all. And the first time they kind of did a double take. And there have been a couple of people who don't know me as well, who walk right past me in the hallway. And then they do a double take and turn around and go, "Oh my God, you've got a beard."
Well, maybe you'll do an update on the
long enough that I can pick on James.
There you go.
And
yeah, we're approaching the hour, so
Yeah.
wait until the next virtual cocktail party.
I was going to say, reminds me of the legend of Sleepy Hollow. I could just imagine if you laid down, take a nap during lunch break, and suddenly 1,000 years from now, you'll walk back with your beard, of course, trailing you.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And then look at if the archives have really lived 1,000 years, or what they'd look like, or on what medium.
That would be an interesting skit to do for our next Christmas party. Make a video of Rumpelstiltskin or something.
Yeah. How you doing there, Greg?
I'm doing well. I do not have quite the same facial hair that.
I'm old enough to remember when you had that dark black mustache.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this all used to be dark. My joke is I'm getting gray from the bottom up. The next thing I do is shave my eyebrows.
Yeah, there you go.
So
well, it looks like Mache pretty
glass
soon.
half full.
Yeah, it could be.
yeah, that would be an interesting SMPTE meeting at the end. We did the ice cream thing that one time, and the other thing would be to go back and find pictures of us when we joined this industry.
Yeah.
Oh, I have some of those. So mine especially.
Well, you're the archives guy. You probably have it of all of us.
Well, and I've
He's
got
his
photos
baby
of me. My first job was at the age of 15 at my local public television station. So I have pictures of me behind a Norelco PC60 at the age of 15.
Wow. You have to bring that next meeting.
Yeah, I may have lost that picture. Yeah, that's it. I lost that picture.
Yeah, from the looks of you now, though, you haven't been behind anything that says Norelco for at least a few weeks.
Well, you'll notice I do shave this. So this is Norelco.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you go. I will wish everyone a happy Engineers Week. We are in the middle of Engineers Week, so bought pizza for my crew today. Little engineers
Last
lunch.
week was Radio Day, so happy Radio Day for those who missed it.
Yeah, and my wife told me that last week was a cat day. Everybody was celebrating cats in the world.
If you have cats, isn't every day cat day?
The cats think
Especially
so.
when they come up to you and when you're on a call and they turn their butts towards the camera.
Yeah, don't have a cat? I wouldn't know, but I can imagine.
I love cats, but I don't love cats that much.
Yes, it's gonna be some border between. So it is 6:59. All right, a few more minutes. I'm gonna get started. A lot of good material, so we don't want to delay too much. Carl is here. All right.
I know Peter's coming. I talked to him earlier. He's coming.
Do the other tab. Oh, Malcolm's here.
Carl.
Carl?
Carl's on mute.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Good evening.
See, Brian is there. Heidi. All right. Hey, Brian. Long time no see.
Hello. Yeah, I'm back.
Good. Just about time.
Don't feel bad, Brian. I wasn't here in a while. I haven't been here in a while either, so. Don't let Mache pick on you.
Why not? It's a still free country, isn't it?
Indeed, indeed.
Hey, Brian,
No fun if you can't razz people.
Yeah, you can pick on your friends.
you have to unmute. Oh. Brian?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. And you're
Hey,
unmuted.
Rick.
Yeah, hey. So I sent you an email about, you'd asked me about how much of a commitment would it be to be a manager. So I'd let Mache and James, all the rest of the folks talk about it if you're still up for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know time is short. Your boys are in college, right? Ethan and
Oh, one's still in high school.
Yeah.
Well, I never found the
Virtual
commitment,
high
you
school.
know, overbearing. I always enjoyed it because half the fun of this is getting to know people and getting to know the things that we have meetings about, technologies and whatever. And so I had a lot of fun being a manager. It was being the secretary treasurer, that was a fair amount of work. And I can't say I miss that too much.
Well, there's less cash flow going through now.
I think
Well, and we don't have to work
as
as hard either.
Yeah.
I was going to say, James, don't talk about that because we have a new candidate for secretary for
Yeah.
treasurer.
There you
So don't,
but it's too late. The
poison the
list
well,
is
man.
closed.
Yeah,
It's
you
done.
can't back out now.
It's done. You can't do anything. Carl, send the list. It's done, sealed, went into the space, and it's not coming back.
So somebody doesn't tell me stuff before I volunteer. Good move, guys.
Hey, nah, you'll be fine.
Well, and when I was secretary treasurer, we had a lot less money than we do now. And so it took a lot more effort, not only to justify things to the national, but also to do the fundraising that we did. Because I was secretary treasurer right when we were starting Bits by the Bay, the very first Bits by the Bay.
But you also had to carve things in stone,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Yeah,
you stole my line. That's what I was
yes.
going to say. Yeah, you had to carve it on. That's what made it more challenging.
Where's my
8 minds think alike,
Fred Flintstone costume? Yes, we did things with stone knives and bearskins.
That's going back with really early media. I don't I think at some point you start with the founding of the United States of America. You're not going any.
Well, to show you how long ago it was, broadcast television was still analog.
Oh my God. Yeah. Who can even remember that?
You can be sure that James has since digitized those stone records.
Not only that, but I have a copy of the very first digital television program ever transmitted on a digital television station anywhere in the world. And this very finger pressed play on that HDD 1000 on July 7th, 1996 at WHD TV in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Wow, is that true? So it took us 13 years to do that transition?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and don't forget the transition didn't officially start until the John Glenn Space Shuttle launch on October 28th, 1998, because that was the first time that all of the Pioneer stations were on the air, and the John Glenn Space Shuttle launch was the official kickoff of the transition. So WHD was just the very first station with the very first programming using the original Big Blue racks. It really wasn't until 1998 that things kicked into high gear.
I know what we can do. I'm thinking about getting some sponsors for this, but you can do like a filibuster for technology. I mean, you could just get started, not refer to notes, and go on until you just collapse, and not stop, just talk nonstop. And then
you're not selling it, Rick. Going until I collapse is not selling it.
Well, that's what people will stay tuned for. Otherwise, you get a spike in hits at the beginning.
Well, and you're saying filibuster, so who am I trying to keep from talking?
Rick.
No, it's just you. I was just using it as an example of someone getting up there and talking nonstop. If they could do it, you know, how long?
Be like those dance-a-thons. It'll be a
lecture-thon.
Sure.
Lecture-thon.
Well, get me and Mark Shubin going, and we'll feed off each other.
Oh God, yeah.
We'll probably create a singularity in the room.
That's true.
Mark Shubin's slowly working his way to the beginning of television, being in the Middle Ages.
Well, he's certainly gotten to opera over telegraph lines in the mid-1800s.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
And circling back to the treasure thing, James, do I recall that you are also a collector of paper money? Is that right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
But there was lots of money at the, all the money that was
everyone collects paper money on some level, but
well, it's not paper money to put in my wallet. It's paper money, you know, different examples of all the different types of American and some foreign paper money over the decades. So I've got stuff going all the way back to the first paper money, which was during the Civil War.
Come on,
you
were involved with the construction of the facility. They must have left some packs of money behind, you know.
No love there. Nope, they didn't leave any money.
Nothing stuck in the cracks.
However, being a currency collector, I actually have a bank pack of $1 bills, you know, 50 $1 bills that were in the facility because I collected them in 1989 when they released the currency into circulation. I started seeing all these dated 1969 bills, and the only thing I could afford at that point in 1989 was to get a bank pack of $1 bills. And so I have sequentially numbered 1969 $1 bills with George Shultz's signature on it. And that was one of the bank packs, one of the billions of dollars that was in the facility I now work in.
Well, this is all very interesting, but I think in the interest of time, we should get started. 7 after 7. I hope that there will be more people showing up as we start, but we're going to start with the usual SMPTE business. Before I do, is there anything else anyone would like to add on the lighter side of living? I guess not.
Apparently there's a Frasier revival coming on Paramount Plus.
There you go. Apparently Disney Plus is, Discovery Plus is doing really well.
Direct to consumer, it's all the rage.
That's right. So, hello and welcome everyone to SMPTE DC section webinar. My name is Maciej Ochman. I'm a section chair. Tonight's presentation is being recorded. Material might be used to promote SMPTE, and SMPTE reserves the right to do so on social media and other platforms. If you disagree with having your likeness and voice subsequently shown in the recording, please turn off your camera and microphone. So at this point, for those who are not aware who the managers of the sections, our sections are, I would like to mention John Footen, Peter Wharton, James Snyder, Greg Smallfeld, Carl Kuhn are all, and Rick Singer are all, if not elected, then appointed and volunteered members. Why? Because they love what they do and they love the camaraderie that we have in our section. So welcome everybody. And if you need our help, here are the people that you can reach out to. And the best way to contact us is to really send us an email at managers@simptydc.org, and I will post that in the chat in case this sounds very complicated. So we were talking about the elections, right? So local SMPTY elections are coming up, and there will be communication coming from the headquarters to when and how to vote. So I encourage everybody to do so. Although the list of candidates is closed at this time, feel free to contact me if you would like to get involved with this section more than just attending webinars. You can email me at ochman@simptydc.org, and I will post that email directly in the chat, especially for you, Brian. Right? Very good. So we have some upcoming events that we're working on as a section. We'll have short conferences / webinars, panels, presentations on a variety of topics that we hope to start in March. We are still in the process of coming up how this will look like. We hope to bring in vendors and high caliber presenters on a very specific topic, and then have a conversation with everybody about that topic. So if there is a specific area that you're interested in, please send us an email with your ideas, and we'll try to include this. And again, that will be at managers@simptydc.org. Also, I would like to mention that in the meantime, if you want to watch our past webinars, please check out our SMPTY Washington DC YouTube channel. I will also post the link in the chat. So there will be more stuff to come. We're very excited about it, and hopefully we'll be able to put something that will be quite enticing for everybody. In the meantime, John Footen and Peter Wharton put together a SMPTY Cloud Club, which will meet for the first time on March 11. There is a huge interest, as far as I understand, not only locally, but really from around the world. And I will turn it over briefly to John to really talk about this, about the details and what's really behind it. So John?
Yes, thanks. So this is really Peter Wharton's idea. Did he join? Yeah, he did. So it's kind of a special interest group sort of thing, focused on cloud as it relates to media, and we'll be meeting on a regular basis. It'll be open to non-SMPTY members so that we can use it as kind of a recruiting tool for SMPTY as well. I'll post here in the chat in a second a link to register if you want to attend. The first meeting we're going to do, there's going to be a Cloud 101 presented by someone who will put a media, with a media spin, but we're not making any assumptions about people's knowledge of cloud. We'll probably do similar to a SMPTY section meeting. We will do a presentation and then, conversation. We got plenty of interesting topics to discuss and debate. It looks like it's going to be really well attended. I have already 120 almost people who've registered. It looks like from all over the world. So one thing we'll probably have to do is to think about the timing of this special interest group. So I invite anyone to come. I'll get the link here. Peter, do you want to add anything?
No, you're doing a great job. Thank you.
So Peter, we'll be promoting the SMPTY section, SMPTY, not our section, but SMPTY in general, because they're from all over the world at the beginning of it. And then we're just going to engage everyone in a great conversation on cloud. It'll be a place to learn. It is a social place. We're not planning to drive standards out of this group, although we might be making some recommendations to SMPTY as a whole about things as we come along. But it's really a place for people who care about, the future of cloud as it relates to media to get to spend time together.
Sounds good. Thank you, John. There will be more to come, but yes, please share that link with everybody. And I guess please feel free to share that link with others who might be interested, right? We want as much exposure to it as possible. So right now, before this is the last thing that I wanted to mention, which is the SMPTY business. if you're looking for a job, or you know somebody's looking for a job, or you have a job you don't want and you want to nominate somebody, right? Please feel to post that information in the chat. I have some links that I'll be also posting, and never hesitate to contact us if you have at manager SMPTE managers at SMPTEDC.org. You can always contact us with job postings or job inquiries, and we'll try to help you as much as we can. So this was the last thing before I want to turn over to the presentation to James. So who is the producer of this event, and he is also 2020 SMPTE James Lindler Archival Technology Medal recipient and a SMPTE Fellow. So James, please get us started on metadata.
Thank you, Maciej. So the presentation tonight, we are welcoming Yonah Levenson from WarnerMedia. At WarnerMedia, she is the manager of metadata strategy and taxonomy governance and leads efforts to extend terminology consistency for the enterprise while adhering to industry standards. She received her master's in library and information science from Rutgers University. She is the co-director, co-founder, as well as an instructor of the Rutgers Online Digital Asset Management DAM Certificate Program, which launched in September of 2019, and I'm sure she'll mention some more about it during the presentation tonight. And that's pretty much all there is to say for introductions. The one thing I would like to say is if you have questions for Yonah, please put them in the chat, and we will be happy as time permits to pose the questions. And there will also be a chance, the presentation is in 2 segments tonight, and you'll have a few minutes between the segments. If you have some questions you'd like to ask, or if we haven't gotten to all of the questions in the chat, there will be a chance for us to catch up at kind of the midway point of the presentation. And of course, if something doesn't occur to you tonight, or if you're watching the recording of this, please feel free to use the contact info either for SMPTE DC or for Yonah herself for any follow-up questions that you may have. And with that said, welcome Yonah Levenson from WarnerMedia.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And I'm really pleased to be here. James and I have been talking about this for close to 5 months, I would say, at this point. And the fact that we actually have the date and we're actually getting started is quite thrilling.
Exciting.
We know how to have a good time because it's all, you know, metadata and data and all that fun stuff. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead. There's 2 parts to 2 separate presentations tonight. One is an overview of metadata. It is some of the information that I'll be presenting is similar to one of the sections in my metadata for digital asset management course that I teach at Rutgers as part of the DAM certificate program. And then the other part is I'll be presenting on the language metadata table, which is an up and coming standard with language codes. So that affects all of us, whether we realize it or not. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm gonna share my screen first. Share screen and my desktop too. And here we go. Of course, and now I have to play. There we go. Okay, so you guys, you're just seeing the single slide, correct?
Yeah, that's
correct.
Okay, and I do have the captions turned on. I've started doing this in governance meetings that I run at WarnerMedia, and it can end up being helpful, although sometimes a little distracting during presentations, but it's really helpful when one is going through the presentations later with recording, because sometimes you go looking for specific information. So as per my introduction, I'm Yonah Levenson. I'm the manager of metadata strategy and taxonomy governance at WarnerMedia. I don't know that these are necessarily careers that people choose, and many of us have fallen into kind of taxonomy and metadata. Maybe it's part of my age group, but here I am and having a good time. I work for WarnerMedia, so you may recognize some of these different images on there. So I just want to give a plug for good old WarnerMedia. So in today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about, metadata in general, different kinds of standards that are out there, approaches if you have to work with metadata. I'm not sure how deep some of you or all of you may end up needing to go, but I find it's really helpful to have some context around metadata and different audiences, and also governance. If there are questions, as James said, he will be monitoring the chat. We're a small group, so feel free to pipe up or put something in the chat, and I want to get your questions answered as quickly and easily as possible. All right, so there are 6 basic types of metadata. And what are they? Here they are. And descriptive, technical, administrative, usage, preservation, and rights. As you can see, if you think I can't count, there is a 7th one there, which is structural. And James, when I interviewed at that point HBO with your buddy Randall Lukow, the question that he asked me was, what are the different kinds of metadata? And I rattled them off, and he was like, that at least I knew something about what I was talking about for the job that I was being hired. And I think
finally somebody who understands.
Somebody understands me. And I think that the reason why I stress these, and I really go over them a lot in the course that I teach at Rutgers, because it starts to give some context as far as what is the metadata that we need to capture and why. So I'm just going to plunge right in. First one I'm going to go over is descriptive. So this is the metadata. Descriptive metadata is the aboutness. It gives, there's descriptive information, meaning that there might be keywords, or there might be a phrase or something, that all different kinds of information that's about the content. And this could be print content, it could be audio content, it could be video content. And I include some examples in here, such as like, what's the number of the project, who's the person, the author, the artist, the photographer. So maybe from a SMPTE perspective, it may also be who's the editor, the digital editor, who's adding in the captions, who's doing this, all the different, while the technical is, does it have a caption? The people who do it, they want to know, sometimes we want to know who those folks are, but we also want to know about what's going on with the content itself. Can we describe it? Is there a descriptive paragraph? It might be short description, long description, the title itself, where this was shot, what time of day something was shot, different information that people often want to search on. It's often very easy to capture information up front when the content is first being created. And a lot of people don't think about that. So if you have that information because you're already there and you know about it, and you can put in 5, 10 little pieces of metadata, it can go really far when people have to search through the content later, because they're looking for, what was that thing we shot, just as the sun came over the Capitol or whatever. And if you have that little bit of descriptive information, it makes it easier for search and discovery. Next one is your technical metadata. And so that's the information about the digital asset. And it might include file size, the type of file it is, compression, etc. Often this information can be gleaned directly from the file itself. Somebody does not necessarily have to sit there and key it in and say, this is 429 bytes. It's just going to be picked up automatically. But people need to know, they want to know which version of the software was used to create the piece of content, because they need to know, what is there a particular editor or something that they need to use. And so all of this information, again, ends up facilitating access to the content, sometimes in the present time and often in the future, because in this business, certainly from the media and entertainment space, you may have your A rolls, B rolls, C rolls. Like I know for Game of Thrones, I think there were 20 to 26 cameras that were used for some of the shots. So you really want to know what's the angle, which camera was it shot, and again, time of day, and some of this, that's the descriptive, but a lot of the technical details, because it helps provide context. Next is the administrative, because they want to know who created it, when was the asset last touched, and where is it? Where can you find it in whatever kind of storage system you're using, whether it's a MAM or just a folder structure in the cloud someplace. That might be interesting for your upcoming meetings when you're talking about cloud storage and other areas. And again, which is I have camera in here for the original camera files. Sometimes I think it can be a little bit at somebody's discretion whether that could be considered administrative or technical metadata. But my understanding, now keep in mind that I have never actually been at a shoot, but this is so some of the information I glean, but with regards to the cameras, my understanding is that there is information that can be keyed into the camera and therefore stuck into some kind of header file for the video that's being shot or the film that's being shot. So if you can capture that information up front, so much the better.
Well, and many cameras also just put their make and model and revision, the software revision that they have. They include that in the headers of their files. You can also key in other information as well.
And that's really important. So if you key it once and then you can apply it many times. So if you keep swapping out camera cards because there's a lot of stuff being shot during the day, or you have a lot of small clips that end up on the camera card, then you don't have to key that information in many times. You just make it part of your business practice. Maybe it takes you 5 minutes or 3 minutes to key in that little bit of extra information, but then it's there, and James can certainly talk about provenance of these different camera files, or any digital files in general. And the more information you have, the easier it is to discover. Somebody actually recently told me a story about how they were requesting some stuff from the archive, and at the end of the day, it was like, well, no, we can't get you the information you want. And he said, well, why? And he said, because it was raining outside, or there was something happened. It was a certain kind of weather, and they had to open the window. And it's like, well, what does that have to do with finding my file? And the answer was, well, it blew off all the Post-its that were on the outside of the camera cases. So if you can actually have the information either embedded in the files themselves or stored in some kind of a digital database, again, the MAM, the DAM, the CMS, or the PIM, whatever it is. And if you have questions about those acronyms, please don't hesitate to ask. But that's the kind of stuff that gets scary to me. All right, so that was administrative. Now we have usage. So again, if you're talking about having a lot of different recordings, a lot of different clips and this, that, and the other, people often want to know where was the asset used? Was it used? Was a particular asset used multiple times? Was it modified in any way, shape, or form? And I included in here just some descriptive information from Dublin Core, which is a metadata standard, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But these are some of the flavors of relationships, because it might be that this particular asset is required by the other in order to be complete. And again, with this crew here from SMPTE, you know about that you may have different tracks that may have your audio and your closed captions and all different kinds of other information that is carried along, as well as the image itself. So all of that usage information, what was actually used, what A roll, B roll, etc. That's really important. I used to work in educational publishing, and it became very important, like how many times was a particular picture used, because then it became overused. And if those of us who have, many of us here, we've been to college, we've been, or we have kids that may have gone through public school or whatever, and they have different textbooks, and then every few years you'd get a new textbook. And one of the things in the public school systems is that the school boards might check to see how close is this version of the textbook to the previous one, and they look to see how many of the images were replaced. So again, to keep the content fresh, make sure that the kids' clothing looks current and it's reflective of the population, et cetera. So they really want to know like how many times a particular asset was used so that they can make sure they update it or it's not overused. And I'm sure the same thing happens with clips, or perhaps even with skylines. If you're doing like, a shot of New York City, or somebody had, I believe it looked like Times Square. How many times was that particular clip with those people walking behind? How many times was that used? Structural information captures information about what is needed to put something together. So the way I tend to think of this is kind of like, sometimes it's like a table of contents of a book. Sometimes the word spine is used because you know that you need to have, if you're putting a book together, books sometimes is easiest for me because you need the cover, you need another blank lining page, then you may need a cover page, you need a title page, you need the copyright page, then you may need another blank page, and then the table of contents, and then the chapter opener, et cetera, all the way through to your appendix if there is one, and an index. So you have to know how your content is constructed in order to put it together in the proper order. So structural, if particularly on a preservation side, they want to know what is needed in order to reconstruct this, because in this world also sometimes technology changes. So you want to be able to make sure you can maybe you need to convert the digital asset to something more current, and then you need to reassemble it in the new format. And the only way sometimes to do that is to know what order the files need to be in order to recreate it. I don't know, James, do you want to add anything there about structural, if I may call on you extemporaneously?
No, but the one thing that is occurring to me that I hope you can include as you go along is the concept of authorities. And how that, when you talked about a building or a person, how authorities are used in the library and archives world, and how they may apply in this context, especially when you're constructing a useful dam.
When you're talking about authority sources, are you also, well, maybe you're talking about rights?
No, I'm talking about, and I'm sorry if this isn't clear. So one of the biggest things when it comes to organizing data, especially in an organization, a large organization with large collections like the Library of Congress, one of the key ways of making sure that you're cataloging that tell you about the assets that you have. One of the ways to be consistent is to use what's known as authorities, and the key asset for that, or the key toolkit for that, is the Library of Congress authorities, which has its own website. And they used to come in these big 3-inch thick books where, people who were doing cataloging would look up Empire State Building and they would know exactly the terminology to use because there are 10 Empire State Buildings. Which one are you talking about? And an example of that could be if you go to IMDb and you look up Betty Davis, there could be 5 Betty Davises. And in that case, what IMDb has done is they've done Betty Davis parentheses 1, Betty Davis parentheses 2, and then they define who Betty Davis is. And so when it comes to making metadata useful, In some cases, especially when it comes to descriptive or anything involving the creation of records that humans would be able to see and use, whether it's searchability or you press the info button on your remote, authorities, the concept of authorities comes into it.
Thank you for sharing that. I have some other examples that I can include, and I touch on some of these a little bit later, but it's from a different perspective, and I really appreciate that.
Sure.
So another type of metadata, again, is the presentation and archival. What are the different things that they need to know? So I mentioned, they didn't, this poor guy who all of his Post-its blew away. So the location in a preservation system, he didn't know what he had anymore, and he would have to open up each case of film in order to see and actually run it in order to see what it was there. But again, they're missing all this other contextual information, most likely. But things that they need to know is, is the asset physical? Is it a statue? Is it digital? Is it, and if it's digital, then you may want to have a checksum to make sure that the file sizes are the same if you transfer from one place to another. Where can you find this particular asset, and what's the name of the system? And also, what's the retention policy? Is, in some worlds, then you want to keep it forever, and some they're going to say after 10 years, whatever, it's not going to be there. And before I got my master's, I was looking for some financial papers, and I was really shocked when I contacted the organization, and they're like, well, we didn't keep that, it's older than 10 years. And it just totally shocked me. And so now, and I've become much more cognizant of retention policies, not just for my own papers, but certainly within the media and entertainment world. There's also, if you license information, if you license content, how long can you actually keep it on your system? At what point do you have to get rid of it because you're no longer allowed to have it? And how do you do that? And how do you design your system so that this way it's easy to remove, and you remain legal because you're following the policy or the agreement that you made when you licensed that image or the content from the other organization.
Could I throw in one extra concept here?
Absolutely.
So you mentioned checksum, and one of the key aspects of creating a large-scale archive has been using checksums not only to validate whether or not there's been, what the file size is, especially when you transfer from one storage system in a workflow to another storage system, but also using what are known as cryptographic hash checksums, CHCs, like SHA-1, like MD5, like SHA-512, which not only show you, the hash that develops, the numerical value from that file that develops, is basically a recording of the bit pattern in the file. So if even one bit flips, the file can still be the same size, but a bit might have flipped because of corruption in the storage system or corruption in the transmission path. That checksum, that hash value can be applied at the other end of the line, whether it be you're pulling back something from storage or you are looking at an archive 20 years later and tell you whether or not you've got data corruption in your storage system or in your transmit path. That's a key use, a very important use for checksums, especially for anybody who's keeping digital collections going forward over time.
So all these different, again, these are just a few things, but I think people don't always realize how important they are. And James just gave these great examples of that there's more, again, from that preservation size, but with also, if I may, with regards to checksums, sometimes it's just, did my whole file make it over to the distributor of my content? Are the checksums the same? Is my content complete? So that's one of the things I want y'all to think about, which is really who are the other audiences for the metadata? And I'll be going into that a little bit more as well. Next is rights. Next and last is rights. So this again gets back into that the intellectual property, licensing, permission, legal information, contracts, who cleared this. No matter where I've worked in my career, somebody always wants to know, can I use that? Am I allowed to use that? What context can I use it? And often people have to go back, they have to look to the legal contract. Is it wholly owned by the organization? Was it licensed? What's the time frame for the license? Was the license constrained by certain types of usage? So I'll go back to my publishing days where, again, there may be this still image and they want to know, can they use it on a billboard? Can they use it on marketing materials? Can they use it as a chapter opener? And again, here, if we think about it, I don't know the answers, but now we're seeing a lot of cell phone videos that people are taking, and I don't know what all the different licenses and permissions are. Are people giving it? Are they selling it? Is it unique just to that one organization? Is it just licensed to that one place? And just because you hit record on your cable box, or you held up your own cell phone to it, are you allowed to make a copy of a copy? What are the constraints, and how do you not get sued? That was something, I think I'll go into an age thing where there are a lot of kids that I worked with who were up and coming. This may have been their first job out of college, and they were used to searching on the web and just taking whatever the heck they wanted, and didn't really understand that they couldn't just do that, whether it was, and that it had to be cleared. You know, there's the Creative Commons standards, there's a bunch of other stuff out there, but it's really important because you don't want your organization to get sued because somebody thought it would be really cute to put this little meme inside something, but it turns out it was licensed. You know, Bernie Sanders made a whole bunch of money, I think, licensing the picture of him with his mittens. And there's a lot of money that went to a food bank in New Hampshire, to Vermont as a result, because he licensed it. Yet I know my cousin did a really cute meme with her son and Bernie camping. So that kind of stuff. So those are the 7 different kinds of metadata. So as you do your jobs, as you go through your day, as you do the filming and you think about what metadata you may be capturing, you might want to keep in mind who are the different audiences for these 7 different kinds of metadata, and then and where else it might be used. You know, who's the audience for it?
We have one question. Let me go ahead and pose it now if I could.
Yes, I was just going to say, does anybody have any questions?
So Phil asked, are you using artificial intelligence, AI, to create metadata tags? I am asking because keeping up with all the possibilities and needs for consistency has an incredible amount of variations in tagging that can occur. AI learns as it goes along.
So I think it really depends on the organization with regards to AI. And then the other questions then become, which of the different, let me just actually go back to these different kinds of metadata. What could you capture through AI? You may be able to get information, descriptive information, technical information. There may be administrative information with regard, because your system, if you're logged into a particular system, they're already going to know who you are. If your system is smart enough to know that you took this particular clip and worked it in, there's that kind of AI or automated metadata capture. But where a lot of people are doing stuff with AI is through the descriptive. They're looking at the color, they're trying to analyze whether it's the mood, what's the mood, how many pictures or how many people might be in an image, are they smiling? They may be looking at ethnic background. in the media and entertainment world, they might want to know if the characters can be recognized. This way they know who was in which scene. However, you often have to train the AI systems so that they can recognize these different kinds of metadata.
Well, and if I may, part of the second part of the question, which was the need for consistency, given the incredible amount of variations in tagging, that's also where concepts like authorities come into it, where if your AI identifies the Empire State Building, part of what you also, if you want to be consistent across not only your own enterprise, but perhaps across an entire field like media and entertainment, one of the things you might want to have a consistent term for the Empire State Building that's in Manhattan, New York City, state of New York, United States of America. And so that's where authorities come into it, is where you have consistent names for things like Betty Davis. Which Betty Davis are you talking about?
Right. And also, I mean, from a geographic location information, I think there are different kinds of geocodes. You can also get the coordinates of an image, so that you know that this is the Empire State Building in New York City, because it's got the map coordinates in it. And so they can nail down what it's supposed to be. And then you can go to the authority source and say, if you're looking at the building in this particular location, here's what it's always called. What people don't always understand is that somebody has to may have to create that authority list. It's not necessarily something that an AI engine can create on the fly. And also another thing with regards to AI, we've had a lot of discussions about this, is that sometimes you may want to use two AI systems because you may have subconscious bias that's built into the AI. So if your terminology, if you only do it or try to apply descriptive metadata from one AI system's perspective as you train it, there may be lost information, or it may be skewed a little bit.
And that could be something as simple as if you're doing AI on language, are you talking about American English or British English or Canadian English, where they may have certain colloquialisms? Like I keep hearing the word jab from the BBC World Service, when here we're using the term vaccination. And so, how do you teach your AI systems to distinguish between jab, which seems to be a more British oriented word for vaccination, and vaccination, which we use in the States?
Great, and another great example. So does that answer the question for now?
So Phil says, yes, thank you. Greg poses another one, which is, he says, I get copyright and ownership, but how much legal or contract information could one put in metadata? It seems like one could put in URLs, but those would not age well.
So it depends then what metadata you might need to put in from a rights, and let's just go over to that one. The permissions or the legal information, it may end up needing to be a contract number. And often legal is not necessarily willing to share the contract information because there may be cost. And again, sometimes people really just want that push the button solution that says, yes, you can use it, and that's all they really want to know. And then the system just needs to capture that little piece. So legal and rights can be very complicated. That's been my experience, and sometimes that's where you have to be thinking about a workflow, and at what point and under what use cases might a human need to actually curate or do the final approval for that clearance.
And that's part of what I was going to throw into it. Part of our experience at the library is sometimes you have to create your own legal version. If it's going to be legal information or contract related, you have to create a subset of the full legal document. that might be included in metadata that gives the key aspect of it, like no access UK or no access Russian Federation, where that's in the legal document that allowed you to produce the show, but it's a subset that somebody has decided that can be included in metadata that gives you critical information, but it doesn't have all the legalese. It's not the whole legal document.
Right. Well, and when I was younger, a little more naive, I used to work in legal publishing, and I helped implement an update to a legal database. And I talked with, and we went through the different kinds of contracts. One thing, if it's a photographer, if it's an individual, if it's an author, if you're licensing content, from an image repository, blah, blah, blah. And what happens is that the content creator or provider tries to make the parameters for clearances as narrow as possible. Whereas the people who are trying to get access to content make it as wide as possible. They want to throw their net out, because also sometimes we don't know what's going to happen 10 years, 20 years down the pike. And therefore, what kind of rights are we going to need? I worked on doing a lot of analysis on boxes. The company bought the photos from like the Whitney biennials and stuff that were from a film strip company. So I had the pleasure of going through boxes and boxes of legal documents from the 70s and 60s. And they had these wonderful images from the Hermitage and from the Whitney biennials. And there was nothing in there about digital. So we could not figure out how to legally use them. And even if you think about it from a museum perspective, you have to sometimes, so I mentioned a statue, is it physical or is it digital? So you would have to get clearance from the artist, you'd have to get clearance from the photographer, and you may also have to get clearance from the museum itself. So 3 clearances would be needed depending on the situation. And also, if you're dealing with people, you may have to get permissions. You can hang up your sign and say, this area is being filmed, but sometimes you also need to get clearances from models or the people who are participating. So it gets really complicated. Rights is about the most complicated you can get. So I'm going to, let's hold off on the other, obviously James and I can talk about this stuff forever. And we have, and we will, but let me get on to the other part of this presentation. I'll kind of try and whiz through it so we get a little bit of a breather before I hit the next presentation. So let's talk about standards. And the nice thing about standards is that you have so many to choose from, which is Andrew S. Tannenbaum. I just love that quote. And he lives in, I believe in the Netherlands at this point, but it's so appropriate. So why do you need a metadata standard? For me, I'm really all about, so the question is where are you going to implement the standard? What terms are you using anything in particular today? How much time do you have to develop whatever you need in-house? Are you going to be sending sending the metadata from point A to point B and all different kinds of stuff like that? And for me, I hate reinventing the wheel. If there's something out there that's pretty good, and let's try and adopt it. And if we can use it as is, it's less work. And people will say, but I really want to call it Fred. And somebody else says, but I really want to call it Ethel. And third party says, let's call it Barney. And it's like, why? Why do you want to change this? And who's the different audience? Who are the different audiences for this? And particularly as this is SMPTE, which is all about standards, you want to make sure that you're able to communicate effectively, because you don't know where this information is going to go. Many of us, I think, so I work for WarnerMedia. I was hired as HBO. A year and a half in, then it was, and so HBO was part of Time Warner. Then we were like, okay, AT&T is going to buy us. Now we're WarnerMedia. And so there's these other organizations that come in. And if you start working with standards, it makes your system implementations and adoptions and when you aggregate the systems together and go more towards centralization, there's a lot less work to do and a lot less maintenance, and it's just easier to move forward. So this is a situation where there's competing standards. You have 14 standards and no, it's not going to work. Let's just create a brand new one for our own. And next thing you know, you have yet another standard. And now you got to do all this other stuff. And I'm going to talk more about that. Okay, so I'm going to talk very briefly about these different kinds of standards that exist out there. I mentioned earlier Dublin Core. This was created in Dublin, Ohio, which as opposed to Dublin, Ireland, it was a group of librarians that got together and they came up with a list of, I think it's 15 for starters, 15 main metadata elements that should be, that are applicable to almost anything. In this past year and a half, something like that, I think they've now extended it to it's up to like 40 something. But often when people talk about metadata standards, they talk about Dublin Core at least as a starting point. Two other main organizations that you are probably familiar with are the W3C and also ISO, the International Standards Organizations. So if you are looking for something in particular, Dublin Core is a good place to get started with terms. W3C is a great place to go just to see what some other standards are. And of course there is SMPTE, but I'll talk about that in a moment, and then ISO. So again, don't reinvent the wheel, see what's out there already. Now, James can probably correct these, but this was what I used in my class, that there were a couple of Library of Congress has their own set of standards. There's the MADS, the Metadata Authority Descriptive Schema. There's the MODS and METS. So again, the Library of Congress has a lot of work that they do from a preservation standpoint. And I find that they're very careful and thoughtful and detailed about what should be captured for these different contexts. So again, don't reinvent the wheel. Use these as a starting point. And also, I think this slide deck will be available as after I have to make a couple of small changes, and it will be available. So this way, if you're looking for a list of standards, you'll be able to go to this presentation and at least have the list of standards available to you.
And I would add the Library of Congress authorities page as well.
The authority, okay, if you want to email that.
I can send that to you, yeah.
And there was another one you were talking about, which was like the Gigi, or maybe I'll send you that separately. I'll ask you that question.
That's fine.
Okay, and then media and entertainment. Here we go. We got SMPTE. There's also PB Core, the public broadcasting. That one hasn't been updated very much lately.
There's actually a lot of work going on through that. It's now hosted at the American Archive of Public Broadcasting. And the last update, I think, was December of 2019 or early in 2020. But there's active development going on in that.
Oh, that's great to know. American Archive of Public Broadcasting. Okay, and then other ones, the EBU, we at WarnerMedia, certainly from my HBO days, that was often the backbone of metadata, particularly descriptive and technical, that we were using. They're quite active, and they have some very nice stuff. And Movie Labs, again, from that distribution standpoint, they are very good at standards and trying to move towards the consistency, because again, why reinvent the wheel? It ends up being very costly on all sides when you have to be able to respond to so many different standards. So this is where it gets us into the methodology. If you're having to work with metadata and you have to come up with your own list of metadata that you're going to capture in the first place, it's very easy. You get started, you have to do some analysis. what kind, you want to look and see what kind of metadata is already being captured in your systems or by your organization. What else do they also want to keep track of? Are they mushing a whole bunch of metadata into a single field? You know, I actually just fixed something we're doing, and somebody put date information. They put November, 2020. And I split it out into two fields. So like, here's the month and here's the year, because if it's November 2020, how do I sort on it? So what are the actions that people end up having to do? And so that's where you have to really be thoughtful about what's being captured and who is the audience. And with all these standards that I just talked about, is there a standard that already exists out there perhaps for a date format or for a geographic location, et cetera? And if you get started and you use, well, I'll talk about tools in a moment, but you can get started with the spreadsheet and use as many tabs as you need. It's one of the really nice things about spreadsheets is you can stretch it wide and you can stretch it deep, and lots of good places. So here's an example of a terms inventory. So I got the term name. So it's like title, and then here's I always like to make sure that for every metadata term that I always have a definition, because I want to take away the ambiguity, because, you know, Fred thinks it means this and Barney thinks it means that and Betty thinks it's somebody else. And we don't even want to know what Bam Bam is thinking of. So this way, if you have the definition and you publish it, it takes away the ambiguity, and now you're starting to talk the same language. Makes a big difference. Cardinality is how many times you can use that metadata term. And whether it's a free text field or whether it's a control vocabulary or pull down list. You notice I include in there for the free text, what's the maximum length? I worked on this horrific project where we couldn't figure out why the data was being dropped. And we realized that the maximum field length was 110 was being sent to a field that somebody decided was 103 characters. So I can't even tell you how many developers that it took till we figured it out, until I finally asked the question, well, how long is the field length? Boom, answered. Avoid it, document it, and you're good. And then you want to know which system, where does the metadata originate? Where does it go to another system? And what is the system of record? Because if any company, I think any of us have ever worked in, it's not like there's just one database, there's multiple. So if you're going to do all this, I'm quite fond of getting started with spreadsheets and workbooks. Google Docs work really well, or Google Worksheets work really well for me, because it's easy to share the information with a lot of people. You add as many tabs as you need. You can sort the data. Most people are comfortable working in a spreadsheet or a workbook, and there's always one available somewhere. Once you have nailed down as much as possible what your terms and your control vocabularies are going to be, if you have the luxury of having a taxonomy tool or an ontology or graph, these also can go into graphing tools. These are really wonderful because they can facilitate the development of systems, because they can become the authority sources in a different way than James was talking about, but they're the authority sources of the metadata terminology. And then the developers can just go and pick up the terms from this master terminology database. And that can make a big difference. Next slide. Okay, cross maps. So in the couple of slides ago, I talked about, you know, what already exists in your system, what metadata is already being captured. So you have to do a terms inventory. What's in each different, what do you have in each system? Because I found, I've done what they call cross mapping. So system A, they may have called it an ID. System B, they called it an identifier. And so now somebody's going to have to know every time I get something from the ID field in system A, I now have to put it into the identifier field in system B. So when you do the cross maps, start seeing what those differences are in the terms, and you can decide as you progress forward with system development to standardize on your terms, like always call it identifier. There's no need to call it an ID. And also you may want to qualify and say it's the product ID, or it's the OCF ID. There may be an ID that's delivered, you know, when you download the OCF files in the first place. So you just take that, but make sure you label it properly. And also, if you're going to be looking at the different metadata standards, include those in the cross map so you know what you're adhering to. And as far as like a good way to move forward, make sure you find out who's going to keep you informed about any changes and insinuate yourself into the workflow. So this way, if somebody wants to add a new metadata term, that they know that they should ask, in my case, they should ask me as the you know, taxonomy governance person, is it okay to use that term? I had, you know, somebody thought up of a new term. We had all agreed on a particular description. It may have even have been genres, and somebody decided they want to call it themes. Okay, well, themes has a different meaning. So James is cringing, but you know, you can't just, because they think they want to differentiate and they have no idea that two systems, you know, there may be 20 systems involved and 3 of them are already using themes. So if you have a cross map and you can show and you have your definitions, it takes away the ambiguity. And if you know about it, you can correct problems before they occur. Taxonomy governance. We're almost done with this presentation, and then we'll be open for questions and take a couple minutes to stand up and stretch. And I'll go into the language metadata table. So here's the scoop with taxonomy governance. You can design the best standard in the world, but if you can't implement it, or if you can't really use it, if it's too complicated or people don't understand how to use it, it's garbage. So what you want to do is make sure that you're using terms that you end up with terms that folks who actually have to implement really understand. And you have to keep on telling them multiple times. Tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, and tell them again. Make sure that you bring people along for the ride. Don't assume that you know better than they do, because there's always a gotcha in there. So if you make sure you get participation in the terminology, in the determination of what the terms are going to be, and you get sign off from them to say, yep, I agree on this term, it's a good one, then you're going to get participation, and the implementation will be successful. When you have the more consistent terms, you end up with time savings, you end up with consistency. So if people are moving around from system to system, they know that ID, you're always using identifier instead of ID, and you don't have to think about it, because it's going to be qualified that this is the title ID or this is the OCF ID. It also, particularly now, analytics is this huge field out there. When people can compare apples to apples, it really facilitates reporting. Let's see what else we have in here. Systems research. So again, when you're doing the analysis, if you want to know where the metadata starts, where it goes to next, what's the workflow? And particularly in the area that you're doing the research on. So this way you can figure out what those metadata terms and go from point A to System B to System C, and make sure you also involve your subject matter experts, because they're going to keep you honest. They're going to know about the gotchas. They're going to know about the corner cases, the exceptions. So this way, I've been in so many meetings where everybody says, well, that's an exception. That's an exception. They go on and on about the exceptions. And then I sit there and I say, but you have listed that same exception so many times, it's really business as usual. So just accept it, embrace it, put it in. And when you document it again and get the sign off, it's much easier to move forward. So write it down. So this keeps going back to This, I think, goes back to James' instance of the provenance. If you know, or the authority sources, if you know where it's coming from.
Could anybody else hear Yonah, or did we all lose
No,
him?
no. We all lost her, but what's
I think we
interesting is
lost her.
that the closed captioning's working.
My internet connection is unstable. I hate that.
What's great though is that you were somehow getting translated.
I just thought we lost the text to speech.
No, it's, well, I'm still here. We'll keep on moving forward.
All right, yeah, we hear you now.
Great, thank you for letting me know. For taxonomy governance, these are often the kinds of people that are participating, just so you know, because it may come up in conversation. You want to make sure you have your production team members, you know, the people who are, these are examples, the data analytics folks, your subject matter experts, and make sure you have them from the lines of business as well as technical, because everybody has to partner. And then if there's other kinds of metadata and taxonomy sources. So again, going back to the few standards that I mentioned before. So the internal standards, whatever you're using today, public standards, and then, you know, how are you gonna make sure that your content or the metadata that's captured is quality metadata. There is out there, there's this, I don't think it's been updated in a while, but there was this amazing chart that had, I don't know, 1,000 different metadata standards all included on it. It was like this wonderful map. And, you know, I just showed you a few, whatever, like a dozen. There are hundreds of different metadata standards out there. Figure out which ones are appropriate in your area. So this is my email address and my LinkedIn and my Twitter handle. And are there any questions?
Peter has one.
Go for it.
Sure. So it's great to have all this metadata, but where do you keep it? And I ask the question because there's so many places that you can store metadata. It can be embedded actually in the essences. It can be in headers. It can be in sidecar files. It can be in a database in a MAM. And because of that and the values of having it in different places, how do you also reconcile when you have conflicting metadata?
So that gets back into the workflow analysis. Because, and I think that this is one of the things that's happening now, particularly with COVID, is that people are recognizing, before it was so easy, you know, you tap, you know, so-and-so on the shoulder and then they could fix it because you guys were all, everybody was in the same place and you could figure out, you had people who had the organizational knowledge, and it was simple enough to, not simple, but you could, you know, it could be reconciled. So that gets back into the cross mapping where if, you know, all these different systems that you're using, whether it's the MAM or, you know, whatever the source is for your files, you want to start listing out what those different metadata fields are from all those sources, cross map it, and then figure out what's the best term and then apply it. With regards to where it's stored, that again gets back into your workflow. So, you know, a lot of people keep information in the MAM, and that's where, but at a certain point, is the MAM gonna end up holding the final files, you know, the finished product as well for most folks? Or is it going to go into some other system from a distribution perspective? Can somebody answer that?
I can tell you from our perspective, the answer is probably both, and it's situationally appropriate.
Yeah.
without going down, it's hard to say that without going down a rabbit hole. I wish I could say more, but so basically, one of the things we've realized in taking a look at not only the metadata that's available today, but also asking the question, what metadata do we need to do our job as archivists? And we have some specific needs at the Library of Congress because we're the copyright office too. So we've got copyright registry related info that most people don't have. You know, where do we put this? Where do the values sit? What vocabularies or what authorities are they based on? And so there's a whole bunch of different levels. First of all, to the data that we want and need to capture, and then are they based on standards? And if they aren't, will they need to make it into standards at some point in time, whether it be a metadata standard, a terminology standard, or in some cases, a technical standard where metadata can't be accommodated in a file, a header, you know, some place where it needs to be, but it can't be accommodated there yet. And so clearly there are metadata types that need to end up in databases because for whatever institutional reason, you need to search on them. And it could be pretty much any metadata term that you can come up with. But obviously they also need to end up in the content or in the archive itself. And by that, I mean like the data robot, where you have a database that tells you where things are and what files are there and how they're wrapped and, you know, stuff like that. So there are multiple levels to this where different types of metadata need to end up in different spots. I'm not quite sure I hit the.
So actually, let me try answering some of the questions that are in the chat, and I'm going to find the answer. There's a question, I'll combine these. Are there any standards for translating between standards? What is the role of master data management system from an architectural perspective? And then the holy grail of metadata and media and entertainment. So this is where, if you end up with a cross map, so you know that from system A, they call it ID, system B, you call it identifier. Then for a master data management system, you determine what is the preferred term that you're going to use for going forward, and what is the source of that metadata, what's the authority source for that identifier, for example, and then you put that into your master data, you call that into your master data management system. As far as Holy Grail, so your translation table ends up being your cross map, and your master data management system, if you have one, or you determine that system X has the master data, then you know what your different targets are. So it ends up being very important. And with regards to the Holy Grail, it really depends on who the audience is, because if you're working on the technical side and you're trying to prepare the files, and you're working with IMF and MXF and all those different kinds of things and the different packages, and you have the different essences and everything, it really depends. So from a descriptive standpoint, is it consumer facing, or is it during the production process, you know, that stuff that happens in post after all the files are pulled together? So it really depends on what you end up.
And that also brings up an important distinction that Evan just brought up, which is there are metadata types that your organization needs to do its business, but you don't want the public to see it, or you don't want certain parties to see that metadata. In which case, and this is where certainly we've done a fair amount of work with standards organizations, because the standards for determining whether or not something gets released outside of a channel or through a searchable index, that's a metadata flag in and of itself. Externally accessible, yes, no, or accessible to certain parts of the enterprise, yes, no. There are things that we see that come from the Copyright Office that nobody else in the library should be able to see, and certainly nobody outside of the library should be able to see. But those little yes, no switches, those are metadata in and of themselves.
Right. So I think we should take a moment just to.
Can I ask one quick question while we're on the topic?
Sure.
One additional, sorry, gang. And this could be a many of you may have a different answer for this. James, this one's really not towards you, because with metadata with you is as important to you as a baseball bat is to a baseball team. So it's a natural there. But when you're looking at the media entertainment industry, your broadcasters and others, is there a particular job function or role that becomes the metadata czar, the person that jumps up and down and screams about how important this is? Or is it a push from someplace else to get the board of directors or the CEO or somebody to acknowledge that there's a need for this?
Okay, James, do you mind if I take that one?
Go for it. Yeah.
So it really depends. I mean, certainly, and I will say from my experience with archivists, then they want any metadata they can get, and sometimes some of them will take whatever they can get because they're at the way end, they're at the total end. There are different kinds of organizations out there. There's DEG, like the Digital Entertainment Group, and then there's Movie Labs and all these other ones that are really focused on the distribution standards, so that they have to make sure that when the metadata goes out, it actually can be shown. So there's so many different. So there's one thing is to adhere to the standards within an organization. They're approaching it differently, but what's happening, particularly because so many of us have been working at home for such a long time and people are having to access files remotely, organizations are starting to realize how scarce their metadata is and realizing that they have to enrich it. With regard,
one of the reasons I asked that question was going back to where James and I worked together in the past, though. I was selling archival systems at one time, and James was a big customer, but going into the television stations and others, they only worried about their archive when something bad happened to it.
correct.
Or their lack thereof. So they had all these tapes that were falling apart and everything else like that. They needed to reference it. Everything was on SneakerNet and playing back and everything else. And it was a crisis that took them to the point for doing this. And I look at kind of metadata as the same kind of thing. Does metadata make them money? Or could they relate to that? And that's where kind of the motivation of my question was coming from.
So one of the things that's going on, for example, Disney, because this was presented at the IDER annual meeting last March in LA, they have, in order to get Disney Plus out the door, they elevated a metadata role up at the C-suite level to ensure that there would be consistency for again, a specific finite set of metadata terms, so that there would be enough descriptive metadata as well as whatever was needed on the technical side to be able to release Disney Plus. And they did a great job, and they're an organization that's really moving towards centralization. I know that there are other folks, I deal with people across WarnerMedia, and there's a lot of inconsistency, and it's basically because each organization kind of did its own thing and they did what they needed to do. But now, as we go more towards all these different apps, whether you're Netflix or Amazon or WarnerMedia or Lionsgate or MGM, et cetera, Fox, Sony, you name it, they're realizing that they need to have more consistent. And Peacock, they want to have their own metadata, or they need to be more consistent in order to be able to get the stuff out in a way that has meaning, A, that they can find it internally so that they can choose what they want to push out the door, and B, so that the consumer has an awesome experience.
Thank you.
Welcome. So why don't we just take, it's 8:22, we just kind of stretch for a moment, and 1 or 2 minutes, and then I'll get started on the language metadata table. Does that sound like you talk amongst yourselves?
Sounds good. Stretch your legs.
we'll give it another moment. But as you all can tell, I'm passionate about metadata, so I can big proponent because I like to be able to see where people can take the metadata, how far it can go, and what can be done with it without having to reinvent the wheel.
What do you think is the most innovative thing you've seen in terms of a consumer experience that makes good use of metadata?
Oh boy. You mean from a media and entertainment perspective?
Yeah.
I don't really know. You mean from a consumer?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know what I'm looking for as, I like to be able to do advanced searches personally. Rather, I'm not as much of a browser when it comes to, we have Netflix, we have HBO Max, and, I have Amazon Prime and, and my cable TV. But it really, I don't really know. I don't really know from that. I mean, I like Amazon. I can do a lot of really good searches in there. And I know that we'll just keep on moving forward in the media and entertainment space as stuff starts to become more consistent.
Well, if I could give a higher level or a broader level perspective, since we deal with so many production entities, in so many different ways, not just media and entertainment, but we deal with publishing, we deal with periodicals and stuff like that. One of the things that we've learned is that, especially for those of us who have to deal with everybody, we have people who are responsible for their areas of metadata. In other words, their markets or their institutions that they're dealing with, commercial and non-commercial. And so what we've realized, at least at the library, is for very large collections, going forward, having a group of people with perhaps one or two being coordinators to get familiar with the different types of metadata in the different market areas, whether they be different market areas within or different companies within media and entertainment, or different market areas as in publishing versus media and entertainment, is crucial, because having a tight group of people who can talk the language of metadata of the various different groups and compare and contrast and figure out how to coordinate between these disparate types of metadata also allows things like standards to start presenting themselves, where it's like, oh, well, my favorite example is the word title. Oh, God help us with the word title. What does it mean? What does it mean in this context? What does it mean in that context? And so at that point, if you can participate in standards organizations or participate in the writing of standards that allow conflicts between words, where title can mean 5 or 6 different things depending on the context that you're in, making sure that that doesn't happen in the future with things, this is where things like the language metadata table and other types of either standards or coordinating organizations like IDER and ACES and IMF can come in handy, where we know that we have heterogeneous metadata that means either the same word means different things or multiple words mean the same thing. You can front load the process so that you don't, quote unquote, make the same mistakes in the future, or you don't keep having the same problems over and over. That's part of where we are, is figuring out where we are today and what problems we can still solve, even though we still have to live with the ones that have come before.
So on that note, I'm going to keep moving forward and now pop into the language metadata table. So I'm going to talk about the language metadata table. So this is just a few of the organizations that are committee members and contributors to the language metadata table. I'm sure you recognize many of these logos. It's quite a group, a lot of fun people, and organizations are committed to it. MESA is one of the sponsors is the initial sponsor of of the language metadata table. I don't know how many of you are familiar with MESA, so I just threw in a couple of slides in here so that, you know, they're a global community and they come from all over. I'm not going to read this to you in the interest of time, but they're really trying to move forward and succeeding in making sure that they create community MESA and thought leadership. And one of the things that's come out of this is the language metadata table. So these are the different areas of focus for MESA. So now I'm going to pop in. So languages, there's lots of languages everywhere, but one of the problems that we ran into is that there was no single unified set of language codes, and that led us to the Tower of Babel, where different organizations had different language standards. So the scope is really to make sure that we are really only focused on languages. We focused on the script and the writing systems. We have endonyms and exonyms, so you guys can read those definitions. And whoops. And our mission statement, we wanted to make sure that that there was a unified source of reference for language codes throughout the media and entertainment industries. So we follow IETF BCP 47. We make sure, you know, the intent is so that we will facilitate efficient and consistent LMT usage throughout the media and entertainment space. And we make sure that the codes are vetted. We use a community. We have the working group. You saw the logos. I reach out to subject matter experts to make sure that we're finding the right codes. Periodically, we do find errors. And I don't even know how I missed this one, but we had Filipino and it should be Tagalog. So that's another correction that's going to be made. But let's go back to the beginning. How did this all get started? I'm sitting in a meeting and somebody's talking about what code are we going to use for Latin American Spanish? And the developer, the architect was sitting in the corner and he was going, well, system A calls it SPA-LA and system B calls it SPA-LATAM and system C calls it LATAM span. And I, you know, I'm all about like, let's not reinvent the wheel. And I'm kind of like cringing and rolling my eyes. And I'm like, okay, we have to just come up with a single standard for languages throughout HBO because this is crazy. Nobody should be having to go through this. So I thought it would take us a few months, my team and I, a few months to do this. And 16 months later, we ended up with the LMT and we had 120 languages. I presented this at a MESA Alliance event. Oh, this is the wrong slide, because it should be this one. The LMT was presented I presented it at their Smart Content Summit, and there's the next Smart Content Summit is on March 16th, and I will be presenting there as well. And we should have a use case from somebody who's actually an organization that's implementing it. We formed a working group, and now here we are in 2021. We're up to version 3.3, and there are 239 plus languages, and there are about another 100 to 150 potential languages on the way. So we created this again because there was all this different confusion. And also, if you look at a lot of different language standards or a lot of different metadata standards out there, they have one field for language. But we know here in the media and entertainment space that we need a field. We need to know what's the audio language, what's the visual or written language, what might we need for localization, and is there another field that's needed for accessibility, for the subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing. There's descriptive metadata, etc. When you adopt the LMT, it makes sure, again, we have these standardized distinction between the spoken, the audio, and the written languages. And if everybody, and this is the direction the media and entertainment is heading, if I am the content creator and I provide a code that the distributor expects, and then the person, you know, and then the organization, whether it's the TV channel or if it's a movie theater or whatever, or you're buying a piece of media, so everybody knows how to interpret that. When they see ES-419, they know it's Latin American Spanish, and you don't have to think about it anymore. As we move through with the LMT, we make sure that there's a use case for each and every, for each language. You know, we just don't want to say, well, do you think we're going to need this? Or do you think we're going to need that? We really try and make sure that there is actual content associated with the request for a language code. It will facilitate licensing. It's going to facilitate distribution, accessibility requirements, and also there's so much going on right now with localization, and people really want to know, is this content available in my dialect or whatever is out there? So we want to, you know, the LMT really helps facilitate all these things because it's a consistent set of coding. So as I keep stating over and over again, there are these different kinds of examples. You know, again, it works for audio, works for closed captions, burned in or forced narratives, accessibility. We have a number of different sign languages on there. Again, the subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing. You can even put in language codes, the LMT codes for acquisition and rights to make sure, again, it's very clear. And then also for EST so that, you know, the consumer knows what are the available choices, what languages is the content available in. IETF BCP 47, this is what it all stands for, the Internet Engineering Task Force, the best current practice, and BCP 47. So it's kind of like, you know, there's always a number in that, in your standard someplace. So it's best common practice number 47. The structure of IETF BCP 47, so it's a standard of standards. ISO, which I talked about in the previous presentations, the International Standards Organization has a list of language codes, which is number 639. They have the country codes, which is 3166. And one of the things that's a little bit different, because a lot of organizations were either just using the 639 or 3166, is BCP 47 also uses the UN. And so that's how we can get to Latin America. ES for Spanish, Espanol, -419. So 419 is Latin America, because that's something that you cannot do with 639 or 3166. And that really can help. So, you know, one could define Central America if that was appropriate, or, you know, you can have generic for the whole world. It just gives us the flexibility that we need. And we are only using these codes, and so this way, by adhering to BCP 47, we're not creating a new standard because we don't need it. Why do we need this? You say, why have BCP 47? You can make over 40,000 combinations. Right now, we have 239 languages with another 100 to 150 languages coming. And that's a lot of languages, but I don't have to worry about, you know, is somebody going to be just sending me Espanol or ES? And I'd have to then try and figure out whether it's Spanish is spoken in Mexico, or Spanish is spoken in the United States, or Spanish is spoken in Latin America. So I can get as granular as I need to be. And also because part of the whole philosophy is make sure you document everything and you have a definition, which IETF BCP 47 does, and we implemented that into the LMT. We take away all the problems that show up when somebody just says, oh, I'm BCP 47 compliant, because now we have a standardized table of what are the legal codes. This is how it's broken out. So it's a pattern of the language, the script, blah, blah, blah. I'll just show you at the end. I have examples of the table. But again, selecting from 9,000 subtext where I can create 40,000 combinations, it's just overwhelming. Some of the languages are more complicated, such as for Chinese. We're having discussions now. We also have, there's a Cube Cinema, which is an Indian or Indian focused, I don't know if that's the right word, content creator, I think, and distributor. They're working on the languages of the Indian subcontinent, of which there's about 63, because sometimes we really need language experts in order to move in order to move forward. So this way we make sure, again, that there's use cases, and we make sure that all the fields that are down in here are included, so we can address them. All right, so here's an example of the table, and I'll have the links to where you can, this is available on the MESA website. So we have the different column heads. So these are some different languages that exist, and then each one adheres to, we make sure that there's values that are populated in these, that all of these fields are populated. So we know if it's part of a group, then each language group will have its own code. We have the audio code. Here's the ES-419 I mentioned. Here's the long description. So again, that there's, if somebody wants to shorten it, that's their prerogative. As long as they use the appropriate language code, then it can be translated. It can be passed between systems without any problems. We include the language, the display language in the native language. So here's Armenian, here's Mandarin, and the visual. So visual is the print. We use the word visual because it makes sense that it's something that you see with your eyes, because we also were struggling a little bit with what should we do with sign languages, etc. So this is an example. This one has an explanation of the column heads in there. And again, all of these slides will become available to you. You know, I'll update them and send them off so that James can get them out, however you guys distribute them. But explains what each one of the different fields are. So some of the languages, the Cyrillic alphabet and the Latin alphabet have equal weight. So we had to make sure that we could display both of them, display name 1 and display name 2, because both of them were relevant and are relevant. So we need to make sure that we have those. And there's still some discussion going on right now on the SMPTE side about, do we need a URN or a URI or URL for each language? My experience has always been that the developers want that so that they have something concrete to grab onto. So we tend to include it. But if somebody else decides we don't need it, it's one less thing to maintain. All right, so this is where we're at today with, as I said initially, MESA was the initial sponsor of the LMT, but we also found we needed a technical home because SMPTE is not a standards body in the same way that, MESA is not a standards body in the same way that SMPTE is, and we needed some more resources in order to be able to maintain and distribute the LMT codes. And there were a lot of requests on the coding, on the coding side. So in order to facilitate development. So on the MESA side, we work on the adoption guidelines and the templates, and MESA provides resources to facilitate the working group meetings and stuff like that. And then SMPTE is providing tools and infrastructure. And we have these are just a few of the partners, but on the standard side, so IDER is fond of LMT. ISDCF is looking into LMT because their language codes needed to be updated, and rather than reinvent the wheel, they're interested in adopting LMT, and same way with Movie Labs. Again, so these are standards organizations that are all needed from a distribution standpoint or for information sharing. And if they're all speaking the same language, no more Tower of Babel all using the same language codes, it makes life better. The other thing I also want to mention is that LMT, while we are geared towards the media and entertainment industry, it could also be used by anybody. So depending on what your world is, it may be appropriate for books, whether it's print or audio books, and it can be really helpful. And also particularly for accessibility. And it can work for packaging. I've had conversations with people who do web page development, and they may have different skins for different languages. So if they can always have the same language code, depending where they're getting their content from, it can be helpful.
So I have a cheeky question, if I may. What about created languages? You know, we're in media and entertainment, and so a couple that occur to me are Klingon from Star Trek, Na'vi from the movie Avatar, Dothraki from Game of Thrones, and those have become self-perpetuating languages because the fan bases have created dictionaries and enhanced content site. And so Evan asked a version of this question, so I'm going to put it out there. What about, first of all, what about created languages, ones that are not on Earth, but are now on Earth? And then kind of a corollary to that is, what about dead languages, quote unquote dead languages, either where, like at the library, we have recordings of people where the language is no longer used by anybody alive, but we have recordings of them. We have writings from them in their own languages. And then things like Latin, where nobody except maybe in the Catholic Church speaks Latin on a consistent basis. But it's still out there. People can still access it.
So the policy that we've been following is, if there's a use case, then submit it and we will run it past committee. So that's always a good answer. With regards to languages, so Klingon, which is included in the LMT, I like the thought of it, but the reality is that it exists as one of the ISO. Klingon is already has an ISO language code, whereas Na'vi and Dothraki and Valerian do not. So is there a use case, or what do we do in the case of made up languages? We're starting to do some research on that now, because there's a lot of different content out there where it would be helpful to be able to have that. People tend to roll their eyes when I bring this up in internal meetings. But for me, if there are linguists out there who may want to say, what do these different made up languages sound like? Because, people are hired to make them up. It would be good to be able to search for the content and say, these episodes of Game of Thrones have Valerian, blah, blah, blah. With regards to the quote unquote dead languages, again, if you want to submit a use case, if you think it's that important that whatever you're doing now with the Library of Congress isn't handling it, then you and I can have a separate conversation about that. How about
something like Latin? Is Latin already in there?
I'd have to look. With 239 languages, I honestly don't remember every one.
Yeah.
But there's ancient Greek and there's modern Greek is in there, or Greek after 1429. I don't remember. But so, we may decide we want to change some of the names of them to make it, just Greek as opposed to ancient Greek. But we're flexible and participate in the working group meetings and send submissions. Take it from there. So now I have a special treat. Some of you may recognize this particular gentleman, Bruce Devlin, who is partner in crime, who's the SMPTE counterpart working on the LMT. And here's the information I think everybody's been waiting for, is that it's going to be part of TC30MR. They're looking at the metadata registers and stuff like that. And right now, so this is where it is, and Dean Bullock and Phil Warren are points of contact. Where are we today with the LMT and the 30MR is that right now, so I guess these are the different steps in the adoption process. So it's being submitted for a second review to address that they wanted some more details with regards to SMPTE, how the registrar is gonna work in harmonization with other groups. And so right now we're just in that early, project review and project approval stage. So now I'm going to have Bruce virtually present to us. So let me know if you can you still see my screen? You should now see a Chrome browser.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, let's see if this works. This is one thing we didn't test.
Here we're showing you a preview of how the language metadata table register will look when it arrives in SMPTE. There are a number of underlying changes that have been made for the SMPTE representation, mostly to allow an easier machine processing, but also to ensure that we have endpoints for each of the individual languages that have some kind of meaning. So let's describe what that means. So an endpoint is a URL that, for example, a machine might use to get back all the XML data for the language metadata table. So that endpoint allows you to grab all of the data in a single go. You might also want to get the latest schema to validate that your data or your extended data still validates against the schema and is still a valid language metadata table. We also have the control document. Now, this is the document that will eventually go through the SMPTE standardization process to define the structure of this register and how it gets updated. Our goal is to put this register through what we call the public CD process so that we can road test not just the data and the presentation and the tooling, but also check that the process is appropriate for uploading and updating new values to the register. So the tooling itself is intended to give you these endpoints where you can grab the fundamental documents, but also some opportunities for human interaction. So for example, there's a way to view the XML of the underlying data in a color syntax highlighted way. There's also the ability to view the schema in a correspondingly syntax highlighted way. But humans tend to like things like looking at data in tables so that you can cut and paste it or find the value that you want or do a lookup in your native script. But there are more than one table. You might also want to look at the data arranged by group. So here are all the different language metadata groups with the languages organized within those groups. You might also want to validate that your version of the table validates against the schema. So we're providing a schema validation tool to make certain that the XML and the schema agree with each other. I'm currently working on a diff tool so that you can figure out what's changed between any two versions, and also a conversion tool, because we know that multiple people may want to convert to and from their own private format for storage in ontology tools, for example. So you might want to take an existing proprietary format and convert it. And so we've got a plugin architecture that allows people to contribute to the open source tools project so that you could convert and turn into the SMPTE format from other proprietary formats. That's basically the overall structure. What we're trying to do is make certain that the machine and human usability of the LMT is maximized, and that people who are trying to write automated software to handle these things have as little friction as possible in getting hold of the data and using that data in workflows.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. And let me go back to here. I'll just finish up the presentation and then we can, then I'll be happy to take questions. So where are we? So if you have any questions, you can send a general inquiries, go to lmt@mesaonline.org. If you go to, this is the main URL, the mesaonline.org. And if you just go to mesaonline.org and then click on communities, you'll see there's the language metadata table. And at the bottom, there are a bunch of current documents as well as the current version, flavor of the LMT. Now I'm just wondering, I have to check and see if I actually updated the XML. I may not have done that. But certainly the table is there. And there's a number of other older presentations. And we also have SMPTE just did a press release about the LMT. This is also a list of some of the validating sources that we use for checking to make sure that the codes that we're proposing are valid. And that's it. That's it for LMT. There's a lot to it, but that's where we're at today. Any questions?
Can you see the question box, the chat box?
I can. Okay, let's see what's in there.
I have a couple of verbal language questions.
Okay. What's the next language area of metadata to be conquered? We're still working on another 100+ languages for the LMT before we go to the next
Windmill that will tilt.
Yeah. Okay, verbal questions. Somebody was speaking up.
Yes, it's Maciej. So first of all, are dialects included in it?
They absolutely, they can be. There's no reason why they can't. And that's one reason why we are also, the BCP 47 is a good solution, because it includes the UN territorial codes. And I think we can get down to more specific areas.
And how do you envision managing that or including that?
So I can pull up if you pull up the LMT, I mean, is there a particular dialect that you're asking about?
No, I'm not. It just occurred to me that, this is getting into very specific. You start on a certain level, you have that many languages, but each one of them can have a dialects. And there are, movies, for instance, that are full of, different type of dialects. And for one reason or the other, you want to identify them across your database, whatever the reason might be, right? And there are ones in certain parts of the world that are more popular, there are less popular for whatever reason, right? So just curious to what extent, how deep can you go in that area? Is there, would that look like? Because you said you had to get some language specialists, right? How are you going to go about, dialect specialists?
So if I could offer an example, one of the first ones that you and I, Yonah, talked about, I don't know, 2 years ago when we first started talking about this, was the various dialects of American English, where we've got, Appalachian, we've got Philadelphia, we've got Baltimore, we've got New York, where there are some very, when people hear people speaking American English in those accents, they have, in some cases, their own unique terms where there are colloquialisms to being from Baltimore, that kind of thing.
So the short answer is that if there is a use case where we need to go that granular, then propose it. But right now we just have English as spoken in the US. To me, a use case example might be Green Book, but the question is who's the audience and what more do they want to know? I'm going to take a minute and call on my colleague, Paul Lundino, who has joined us. And just, Paul, is there anything that you would like to say or include about the LMT from a technical perspective that might be useful for this audience?
I mean, nothing in particular, just that we've kind of implemented it as our receipt validation. So we are, making that our standard for languages that get delivered to us. And it's mostly because because everybody says, oh, we're using BCP 47, but that the number of combinations don't really lend themselves to any kind of UI displays or anything like that. So one of the useful things in the language metadata table is the display names that we can use and associate a code so that we can use that in our workflows and then look up the display name for any kind of human interaction with content, so they can see against a name rather than just a code. And then the other thing is to specify the maximum, to make it as specific as possible, as far upstream as possible, right? Because a lot of times we've had problems where the QC groups are kind of guessing at what the dialect is. And it's like, they're not the best people to know whether this is, you know, a certain, that this is Brazilian Portuguese, or like the closer you are to the content creation, the better you're able to identify what the language is and the content. And so for certain languages, we're requiring at least a minimum specificity of dialects, like Spanish, because being able to distinguish between Castilian Spanish and Latin American Spanish is very important.
Well, and is there any kind of thought about what is the term I've heard is things like Spanglish, where you have Puerto Ricans who go between their homes in New York and the home island, and they freely mix both Puerto Rican Spanish and American English together in the same sentence? Is there any thought about hybrid languages like that?
That it's recently come up, and also Hinglish for Hindi English, is another one. So, you know, we're going to go, you know, this is all like SMPTE in many ways, we're all volunteers. So, so my new co-chair, Meg Morrissey, so she's, you know, been doing research. We have an intern 10 hours a week who's, you know, sponsored by MESA, but then I really push back to the organizations that are requesting the changes. So, so with regards to, like John Footen put a note in with regards to Vikings, where it's got Anglo-Saxon, Old French, Modern English, Arabic, Greek, Hindi, and Urdu. If somebody is going to go to that level and is going to mark that all those languages are in the show Vikings, then if those languages aren't in LMT and some of them are not, then submit it as a use case. You fill out the template that's available on the MESA website, and you can, and that's where that's a real use case. There's actual content, and here's the language. Are you going to populate, you know, is your organization going to populate it or not? Just because a dialect exists, is somebody just going to write EN-US for United States English, or English is spoken in the United States? So those are decisions organizations have to make, and then they submit the request.
You know, honestly, it's a really good standard strategy that you're requiring that first there be a use case and a request before you deal with something.
Absolutely, agreed. Another question I had about the adoption of the table beyond, you know, worldwide. Where do we stand with that?
So I'll get a heads up that at the MESA Smart Content Summit, there will be a use case from Viacom, Showtime, and who's the other one with a CBS. So that's all one organization now, and they're adopting LMT. Paul, my colleague, just mentioned, you know, it's being adopted across WarnerMedia. So there was, you know, so Paul's one of my, you know, it's like, you know, get into the workflow. So Paul knows to keep me informed. Hey, Yonah, I saw this weird thing. Let's fix it. And so now it helped with facilitate the adoption. So there's more and more of this happening. Movie Labs is interested in it, but it takes time. This is turning a cruise ship. It's not, you know, we're not a speedboat here.
Yeah, no, I mean, understandable. And, you know, those enterprises that are worldwide, you know, like for instance, Discovery owns TVN channel in Poland, which is the most watched channel. You know, they could enforce adoption of this, right? If Discovery is part to this, right? But there are other ones who are completely independent, you know, and what is the value to them adopting it as opposed to using their own ways?
Because we're going more towards the localization. So if let's just say WarnerMedia is going to be delivering to Poland, right? And if there are, you know, so actually I'm going to take a step back. The movie Roma, I forgot the director's name, but that was originally, Roma was made in Mexico with Spanish is spoken in Mexico. It was sent over to Spain. Castilian subtitles or closed captions were put in, and he was furious because he felt it lost the flavor. This is a New York Times article, which I saved. It lost the flavor of the Mexican Spanish. So he yanked it from Spain until they fixed it. So, you know, this way, in my opinion, then from an artistic perspective, if you want to apply a particular, you know, a particular flavor of a language, because we had, you know, things, my boyfriend says, well, how'd you spend your time today? You know, what was your day like, sweetheart? And it was like, well, we had a big discussion on German as spoken in Switzerland as opposed to Swiss Deutsch. Okay, so, you know, those are the conversations that we have because they are different. What the content creator chooses to apply or what the translation service is being asked to do, I think is clarified by applying LMT codes only because it's already explicit.
Okay. I also have last question for me, just in general terms, you know, what is in your mind the single most important reason why metadata matters? Existential question.
Existential question. Well, because particularly with where we are today, there's a tremendous need for search, for enhanced searches, and also for discoverability. And unless you have some hook to grab onto, it's always going to be difficult. So the more metadata that you can apply that's going to facilitate search and discovery, the better it's going to be, whether it's an internal experience for your own organization, or there's information that wants to be pushed out that's consumer facing.
Okay, thank you.
And one follow-up question that we've gotten in the chat window is, how will current closed caption standards handle the new LMT codes? And I would actually extend that to any of the other alternative language distribution methodologies, like you know, open captions and tags on audio channels and, you know, stuff like that.
I mean, we recently got a question where I am not a programmer. I'm really focused on metadata terminology, but there was an example that an organization gave where I guess they were trying to do two different closed caption streams on at the same time, which I guess is more common. I have my limited experience, and what I was taught was that there should just be one language per track in your file. I mean, don't comment on that, but it's really, all we're going to do is say, and here are the codes. However you want to interpret, however you are going to use it in your workflow or what you choose to distribute, that's your prerogative. On the other hand, and as long as you use these codes, they should be interpreted, and then whoever is sending and whoever is receiving, if you use those consistent codes, it's a level of translation that nobody needs to go through because you're already consistent.
Well, the most complex one I've seen so far is some Korean language programming that appears in the United States. And the worst one I've seen, or the most complex one I've seen, where they have 7 different closed caption tracks.
Because there may be, but again, unless somebody gives me, submits to the LMT committee, not to me, that says we need these 7 different flavors of Korean, then it may not.
It won't get implemented. In other words, they have to ask for it.
They have to ask for it. Right now we have requests for different Chinese dialects. So we're starting to go towards Singapore, Taiwan, as well as mainland China. There's only 2 written language options, which are simplified and traditional. But as far as the dialects go, and then there's all these other, Hokkien and Minnan and all these other ones. And the languages of the Indian subcontinent, there's over 60. So.
Well, and I imagine from an implementation perspective, the first step is just dealing with the language code. If you have 7, for example, 7 different closed caption tracks, that in and of itself may present a challenge to, not only including the code, but then how many different tracks can you include in a given file, a given transport stream. You know, the language code just gets the work started. There may be other technical hurdles beyond that, and that's what folks like us deal with. You know, the SMPTE folks deal with is your transport stream only allows you 4 tracks. How do we now expand it to 7?
Right. And I'm going to stay away from that. That's not my area of expertise.
That's cool. That's why we make the big money.
But you all have it. So I know we're way past time, but I'm, you know, if people have any other questions, I'm happy to answer. And Paul, I really appreciate your perspective and your input as well. Thank you. And James.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, I think we should all thank Yonah for finding time and sharing with us a great deal of information. James will be looking forward to sharing a presentation deck. I think there's a lot of good information there that everybody could use afterwards. So please share with us afterwards. And James, I'm going to leave it up to you to close out the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Maciej. So Yonah, thank you for all your time and effort on this. I'm glad we finally managed to make this happen. I think the first time you and I talked about the possibility of this was at an IMF meeting at Deluxe Labs in LA a year and a half ago when the world was still different. And so it's a big thrill to finally get something like this done and in the can. And I'm certainly going to be looking forward to whatever comes out of this, especially with the folks who may watch the video later on. So thank you for all the time and effort you've put into this. And certainly thank you for all the time and effort that you and everybody else has put into the language metadata table. I know, speaking, you know, with my experience at the library with all the different languages we have, it's work that has needed to be done for a long time. And even though we're only, you know, 10 or 20% down the road to where it needs to be, we've started that journey. And so thank you. And thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you to everybody for all your great questions. And if you have any follow-up questions, you've got the contact info. We will be distributing the deck on the SMPTEdc.org website. And let us know if you have any follow-ups that you'd like to see regarding this, especially if there was some part of this subject that either we didn't cover or that you'd like to see more on later on. Please email your suggestions to us or send your suggestions to us at managers@SMPTEdc.org. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great time, and see you next time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You all. Thanks.